Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the November 7th, 2022 I'm President, and before we just a couple of quick comments before we get to the invocation and pledge. It's nice to I don't know if anybody else did it. I received nice feedback from our last week's speaker, Ray Range, how to talk to each other about politics over Thanksgiving dinner and survive, etc. So please, everybody, remember tomorrow is election day. If you haven't already, vote. And we especially want to thank the guests we had this year and members who are actually running for office. Just thank them for stepping up and being part of the process. That's what we will need, whatever you're running for, whatever party you're in. It's a great part of our club. So with that, Tommy, you want to start us off with the invitation of the pledge, please?
Thank you all for being here today. To be here together with you to bow your head, give an invocation, and we'll say our pledge. Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering us together, for putting these Rotarians in one place to do good work. We pray that our hearts will be moved in preparation for the speech today about Veterans Day and in preparation for voting. We ask that you strengthen this country, and that part of that process would start with Rotary, and the people that are here to be part of that contribution. We thank you for today, for the beautiful weather that we've had this weekend, and for the hopes that that's brought families together in our neighborhoods. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America. Stand aside. Thank God. From thousands to the rains, to the oceans, wonderful. Get on so there we go. Sweet home. Our day, they are one. That's it. Yes, you're today. Nice meeting you today. I was like, if you don't mind, if you come up and just briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, if you want to.
Hi, my name is Stephen. I'm here because I was recommended to go to Rotary by a business woman. And I'm really great at speaking.
You're doing great. And I understand Ethan is a local businessman. He's running a
I run a car wash business in Johnson County. And anything else to say? That's about it. But I appreciate you letting me be here. It's a wonderful honor. And
name of the car wash.
American Wash.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Anything in common public speaking is stress us. Eric, you have a guest here today.
Yes.
How about the analyst?
So we brought on Bryce Lyons. He has a history in installation, sales, and installs, just like myself. So we was together. We're going to crush it and take over Raleigh as far as installation goes. So yeah, there we go. So
Well, let's go with Juan Station. I know the scales just walked in. Oh, very good.
Hello, my name is Laura Correction, and I'm a member at West Raleigh Rotary Club. We meet at the faculty club every Friday. And today I happen to come here to have lunch with my daughter and grandkids for the birthday. And I saw Rotary clubs. I said, oh my God, I can bring you to lunch here. But I'm the president elect for West Raleigh Rotary Club, so you're all invited to our club any Friday, faculty club, at 12:30.
That's great. And everybody, please remember, red buckets on the table are for the Dementia Alliance of North Carolina. Small change, coins, there's monopoly money on there. If you don't have, after you might come out there, a buck for 2 for 5 and put it in, and it all adds up, as the years go on. I do want Charlie to stand for happy hours. Really ask for that. Now, I'll answer it all.
Great, okay, yes, President Tom.
Okay, so happy dollars. Anybody might have big wins over the weekend and whatnot. I have something bigger. Here's $10 for my oldest daughter Carolyn, lives out in California. Had our third grandchild on Halloween night, 11:47 on her front porch. Literally, but out of this world, the one fair haven't stopped there, so. It's great. It's Friday night.
How about the dollar for the Houston Astros?
Nobody's happy. Okay. Over that. Upcoming meetings, we have a meeting next week here. I think you'll find a little more interesting, talking about organization he runs, to help, men return to being, productive fathers, back in their families who have come on tough times. And it's a very interesting organization. I think you'll like this message. We're off Thanksgiving week. And then at the end of the month, we'll come back that last Monday of November with Ron Smith, who's written the book most recently on the history of Carolina. And he'll talk about the #1 team this year and private situation. Then we'll skip right into membership. Harrison, thank goodness, is having double duty today, running our AV laptop, but it's also has some important membership messages today. So there's the take over.
Hello, everyone. Doesn't it feel wonderful outside? Nice and brisk and chilly. Thank you all for being here on such a beautiful day. And I don't know how I feel about being following up to you as the other Hoot fan. So let's go do that. With that being said, we have a couple things to do today for membership. First, Mossy, if I can have you come up front, please. Thank you so much. We have a first reading today for Miles Walker. So Miles, who been sponsored by Jim Dorset, who works and resides in Raleigh, is an associate at Smith, Anderson, Blount, Dorset, Mitchell, and Jernigan, where he practices in finance, private equity, and venture capital. Outside of work, Miles serves the community through such organizations as Activate Good, the Public School Corps of North Carolina, and Band Together NC. Miles is also devoted to professional development, having graduated from Leadership Triangle in the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership, and currently participating in Leadership Raleigh and Leadership North Carolina. Miles is also active in civic matters, including as a member of the Courts Commission and General Assembly, and as advisor to the Department of Commerce in the city of Raleigh. Originally from Greenville, Miles spent his entire educational career in North Carolina. After attending D.H. Conley High School, where he graduated as valedictorian, he attended Campbell University, where he graduated summa cum laude, majoring in political science, and then the University of North Carolina School of Law in Chapel Hill, where he graduated with honors. Miles is very active in the community. I'm very excited to have him as a potential member for the Rotary Club. I know you know quite a few people here being in the industry that you're in, so very happy to have you. If you haven't met Miles, please come and see him after the meeting. If you have any questions about his friendship, please reach out to me. Thank you so much. And next, what would a Rotary meeting at the Rotary Club probably be without an introduction? So, Dr. Carter, please join me up front. Thank you so much. Very excited to have Dr. Carter join the Rotary Club Raleigh today. As a reminder, she is being sponsored by Mark Hackett. Dr. Carter, your membership application has been reviewed and approved in accordance with our club's constitution and bylaw. And we will now proceed to move to the Rotary Club Raleigh. We have a few questions for you to answer. So question number one.
Question number one, will you join us as we try to live a life of self?
Question number two.
Later on, Greg will lead us to the 5-way test. We join us in our activities, service projects and fundraising activities to support our community.
And question number three.
Will you join us in supporting Rotary's efforts worldwide, which include these seven focus areas? Promoting peace, disease prevention, providing clean water and sanitation, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, economic and community development, protecting the environment.
And fellow Rotarians, will you join me in fostering and supporting Dr. Carter as she joins us in our pursuit of adding value for the community? If so, please say I do. President Tom, will you please provide Dr. Carter with her
It's my pleasure.
Please wear that with pride. And everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Carter to the Rotary Club of Raleigh.
Service report is Richard on the line, Emerson, you know, I know he's off in Cincinnati for his training for a new job over the Cancer Society, but he may not be. So,
Yes, sir.
if not, this is the main message though. If you haven't already, and it was in this morning's bulletin, the sign up link as well. Please sign up for our next service project for November. It's our last service project of the year, except for Bellevue, which starts very end of November. But it's with a no pocket, a great organization. We'll be helping them take in related clothes, sorting them, do quality control. It's only for 3 hours on Saturday, November 12th. So please think of just take 3 hours and help them with the activities. And actually, before we get to our still on service, Kevin, I'm a little discombobulated for the meeting started. Did you want to say anything about bell ring before we move on?
We only have 2 meetings before bell rings start. So by next week, I'll give you back the link for the sign up. So I'd really like to start before the next meeting because we start Monday right after Thanksgiving. And that's going to be, by the time we meet, we have already completed 4 shifts. So I hope to have that, all in place. But bell ring again this year is going to be 4 weeks roughly between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. through 7:30 o'clock at night. Same Walmart, same place, and all the same. Ideally, for the newer members that haven't done this before, there's 1-hour shifts. We ask that everybody try to do 6 hours, not in a row. You can do all 6 in one day, or you can do 6 1-hour shifts at various days. if we fill up the schedule, the ideal thing is you're out there for an hour slot, and I'll explain all this next week in more detail. But it's a great time to get to know two Rotarians, because you'll spend 30 minutes with one Rotarian during half hour, and the next half hour, somebody else. So, two things, we're raising money for a good cause, it's a great service project. You get put you in this Christmas spirit, and you get to know Rotarians, which I found very.
All right, thanks, Jeff. And to our new members and our guests, we've been ringing the bell of the Salvation Army for years now. And really it's an important part of what we do, the money we raise, which we end up raising a lot of money. You'll be surprised how generous people are who you may not think are in a position to be so generous. We're out in front of a Walmart on New Oak Road, New Oak Church Road. But it's a very rewarding experience. Sometimes standing out there, 32 degrees weather, next to one of your fellow members, getting to know you from and doing this. So please look for the center Tuesday on top, so we can fill all the slots. I think this year is the first year since COVID that we have the full schedule of all the slots available, starting giving them.
And this is something I learned at Phil and the Salvation Army Advisory Board. Something I learned. The Salvation Army has learned that if anybody wants to volunteer, the volunteers that staff the kettle basically taking twice as much money as the employees that staff. So that says a lot for our efforts as volunteers to be honest.
Next is our last report on our recent fundraising event. I know Carrie is online today. So Carrie, feel free to chime in there if you want to come up. And give a final report. I'll wrap up on the fundraising.
Yes. So.
Follow up with such great people.
And to receive Kirk, which I'm excited to bring speech, just so you know, I don't have to make for to this meeting. So to wrap up our fundraiser, we got everything in, everything paid for. So we ended up making a net value of $3,652.13. Which was much better than I was expecting, so I'm really pumped for next year. I got a bunch of ideas in mind and a bunch of different fundraisers that I'm going to be putting forward. So me and Carrie will take care of everything. And again, thank you all for the support. Without all the donations that we brought in as a club, we would not have been able to make that money. So a lot of that goes to the Rotary Foundation, and then also Gift of Life, so and Folio. So we're really excited about it. Thank you guys so much.
And again, a special thanks to 2C and Carrie for leading this effort. It really takes a lot of work to put a fundraiser on. And we also want to thank the city club for hosting it and making it such a delightful event, just with ambience, food, beverage. You can see Jack over there, Jack Rockman from the city club. So thank you. We hope to continue that relationship. Before we get on to one more announcement of birthdays and anniversaries next year, we have a special foundation, not a report, but a report on a special foundation event of giving that our foundation chair, Kirk Warner, wants to share. That's correct. And if Kevin would come up and join me, please, and I didn't see Peg. I don't think he is our co-chair. So, President Tom, if you would come here and when I cue you in, maybe take the presentation. But we talked about the local club foundation do some stuff about the funds that were raised for that and other causes. But Rotary is an international organization, so we encourage people to Rotary International as well as the club foundation. And you heard us announce Paul Harris Fellows before. That's when somebody makes $1,000 contribution to Rotary International. Well, when you get to a certain level and you give $10,000 cumulative to Rotary International, you become known as the major donor.
And we're here to recognize Kevin today as a major donor. I was talking with another Rotarian over the weekend, and this person said, you know, something about Kevin, he doesn't make a lot of noise, he just gets stuff done. And I think that's a really good description of Kevin. And true to form, he actually achieved major donor status in the year 2020. And we didn't find out about it until just recently, so we're a little bit late. He's already done additional giving since then. But I wanted to go ahead and recognize Kevin as a major donor. And whenever we do talk about Rotary International, we like to talk about the kind of projects they do. So in this case, when we talk about a Rotary Club in Spain, in Mijas International specifically, and they were giving food to folks that didn't have the wherewithal to have their own food. But they found out something started. A lot of people feeding the food didn't have the appropriate tooth structure to even eat the food. And that was how bad the situation was. When I heard about this, I thought this really resonated with this group that sponsored Wake Smiles. So what they did is that this other Rotary Club, funding through Rotary International, were able to go ahead and work with some dentists and some dental technicians to have sort of a plan for these folks. And so they were able to help them. We're folks get dentures to get their teeth taken care of. And then the next time that they delivered food to them, it was a real special thing. So folks like Tom and other people that give to Rotary International do that, make that kind of thing possible. And so I want President Tom to recognize Kevin for his giving to Rotary International as a major donor, again, a $10,000 contribution. That has to be the prettiest Rotary meeting I've ever seen. Take a look at it after the meeting. Let Kevin show you that is beautiful, and the sequel glass item don't drop. So let's all recognize Kevin for his.
Congratulations, Kevin, and thank you, Eric. No anniversary, but birthdays at John Martin, November 9th, on November 10th this week. Jim Dorsett has a birthday. Happy birthday, Jim. Ron Garber, November 12th, and I don't think I saw Pete out there, but he was sitting here last week with his friend. The Page Donaty has a birthday as well. On November 15th. So let me move forward then to what we have for the meeting. But it's a very special what we have left. It's talk given by our own member, Kirk Warner, for you, visiting Rotary, to guests, to new members who don't know Kirk. Kirk has been a long time and valuable contributing member to our Rotary Club. And we turned out next year to say somewhere Veterans Day, which is coming later this week. And also this year is special in that Kirk is a published author and has written about something very special to him. You'll hear more about it. That has to do about what heroes have gone through defending the country. I think it's an intriguing story. Let me tell you just a couple of things, 2 or 3 things about Kirk. Along the lines of what he's done, which is inspiring, I think, to a lot of us people who are getting on years towards the end of our career at the end of it. But hopefully, you young members too will be inspired by some things that one can plan into a life. And not just kind of life, but be meaningful about it. Some of these have to do with being lawyers, some of these have to do with being in the military. One of the highest achievements one can earn as a trial lawyer, which Kirk is with Smith Anderson Law Firm, is to be invited to be a fellow of the American College of Law, which Kirk is. He also serves on the board of the USO, the board of directors, He's been secretary for an organization that's very painful to him, the North Carolina Society of Cincinnati. He's been chairman of the board of directors, the North Carolina March of Dimes. He was president of this club from 2015 to 2016. And this is one of my favorites. He's also has served on the board of directors for the Triangle Football Official Association. Maybe 30 years of his experience in high school football in the area. And Kirk retired from the U.S. Army after 33 years of service. He was deputy legal counsel to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon for 3 different Joint Chiefs of Staff chairmen. And he was also deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And recently became deputy staff judge advocate. And also got impacted in the and in 2003 was the senior judge advocate, which is turning in the military, and the command operations center during Kuwait during the March. And along the way, starting way back in 1980, he graduated from the Ohio State University, received his JD Duke, then received, and this I think just lastly just identifies Kirk's sort of a breadth of interest in what goes into writing books, not only practicing law, not only serving in the military at high levels, but he obtained his master's in history from North Carolina State. He received a master's in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College, and lastly, obtained his MBA in biosciences from NC State in 2015. So with all that, Kirk bringing all that with him. In particular, he's going to hone in on Veterans Day and his book that he's recently, but everything, please welcome Kirk Warner.
Schedule Tom to follow me around and introduce that. Nicely done. Don't believe any of it though. All right, well, this is a special day. I see a poppy, at least one extra poppy out here, so that's good. And Charlie, thank you for wearing your poppy. Let's see. Am I hearing all right? All right, there is not a Veterans Day that goes by without me doing at least 2 things. 3 things. One is wear a poppy, and the second is to make my remarks, and I'll steal the exact quotes from President Ronald Reagan of his Veterans Day speech in 1985 at Arlington. We celebrate Veterans Day on the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice that began on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The timing of this holiday is quite deliberate in terms of historical fact, but somehow it always seems quite fitting to me that this day comes deep in autumn when the colors are muted and the day seems to invite contemplation. We're gathered at the National Cemetery, which provides a final resting place for the heroes who have defended our country since the Civil War. This amphitheater, this place for speeches, is more central to this cemetery than at first might seem apparent. For all we can ever do for our heroes is to remember them, and remember what they did, and memories are transmitted through words. There's a special sadness that accompanies the death of a serviceman, for we never are quite good enough to them. We're not really. We can't be, because what they gave us is beyond our power to repay. And so when a serviceman dies, it's a tear in our effort. The great in the whole, and all we can do is remember. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see those soldiers in our mind as old and wise,
We see them as something like the founding fathers, gray and gray hair. But most of them were boys when they died. And they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they wouldn't have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us, and all we can do is remember them. Says Ronald Reagan in 1985. And then the second tradition that I have to start with now, and with something special, very similarly. In the proud tradition of Veterans Day, Flanders Field, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae of the Canadian Army composed in Flanders Field on May 3rd, 1915, riding in an ambulance during the Second Battle of the Free, within sight of poppies blooming across old battlefields and fresh graves. His close friend had been killed the day before, and in spite of German attacks using chlorine gas, the Canadian Army held its position. Lieutenant Colonel McCrae himself died from disease in 1918, the war's last year. So he starts with a tribute to his fellow veterans. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard among the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field. So I think that final stanza of that poem is kind of the charge to all of us. We must always keep that charge to hold the torch up high. So, and I often do my Veterans Day speech. I often talk about stories, about how the part of America's fiber and absolutely must be told. So, that in mind, I have a couple stories to tell. Ready? There's our poppies. Okay. So I'm going to talk about someone very special to me. It's actually is my uncle, Hoot Gibson, who flew off Yorktown Midway and flew off Enterprise and Guadalcanal, and then continued on the war in the right capacities from the until the very last of his namely 13 major battles. So this happens 8 years ago. Next week, it will be November 14 is one of the most seminal days in his career. So this is a book. I decided not to bring a bunch of books today because I didn't think it was appropriate for Veterans Day, but it's you really want to copy what Linda and I know, and I'll get something autographed to you later. It's not a day for commercial experience. So here's Hoot. Now, what's interesting about this? Hoot's on the right. What we all look like. We have the Gibson chin. It's like a little butt. But the guy in the middle is Cal Buell. Cal Buell talked to this Rotary Club back in 2006, maybe 2007. He and my uncle Bob grew up together just apart across the state line in Iowa, Missouri, where a lot of fighters came from. But Hal talked to us maybe 15 years ago. He was 92 years old at the time. So Bob and who's who? Bob and my uncle Bob and Hal Buell go back that far. This is their training in St. Louis. Before they all went down and this is what people did. And it was actually before that they were flyers, and they decided, hey, why don't we fly for the service? Hitler was having all kinds of issues in Germany and standing. The Japanese were starting to threaten, even though Pearl Harbor had not occurred. So they signed up in early 41 and started to fight in Pensacola, Ocala, and San Diego, Miramar, and North Iowa. So, Midway. First of all, he was assigned originally to the Lexington on bombing 3 to dive bomber pilot. And if you've ever tried to think about dive bombing, there's horizontal bombing and then there's dive bombing. And the horizontal bombing is a problem. It's like, and even dive bombing, it's like standing with a marble in front of you and trying to drop it on a cockroach. It's almost impossible to do in the heat of battle in an ocean that big. So it takes some real skill to do that. So he was assigned to bombing 3, was in San Diego, had not done his actual carrier landings to qualify yet. And he's at the San Diego Zoo with his sister and her husband. And they announced, this is on December 7th. He's supposed to actually do his carrier landings later that day on December 7th, 1941. They make an announcement over by the giraffe cage saying all servicemen return to their posts and billets. They didn't know what was going on. And finally they realized that Pearl Harbor. So my uncle threw his sister the keys to his car and says, I'll be back in 2 weeks after we kick the Japs' ass. That was his response. 4.5 years later, it was quite a way, but that's what everybody thought. They were all part of. So what happened is Lexington steamed away before his carrier landings in. So he had to do his carrier landings on the Hornet, which was coming through later. So he missed the early battle of the war. But now let's jump up to Midway. So he gets to Midway, or gets to Pearl Harbor, and the Yorktown has just come back from the Battle of Coral Sea. Lexington was lost, and we only had about 5 carriers at the time. Japan had many more, and the Lexington was lost. So bombing 3 was no longer his destination, and Yorktown was hit and drugged back to Pearl Harbor in 3 days. They had to repair because intelligence had shown that there was a Japanese carrier force, 4 carrier forces coming to attack Midway and to potentially then go to Pearl again. So Yorktown in 3 days went from total repair job and launched May 28th. Some of the pilots had never landed on carriers, the new pilots. And remember, there were about 150 pilots in the entire Navy that could fly dive bombers. We were well armed. So these are 3 carrier groups. That was the Hornet, the Enterprise, and Yorktown. Took off after what was going to be a surprise attack from 4 Japanese carrier groups who were essentially invincible. They didn't count on Yorktown coming out. So those folks took off, the new pilots landed. He was now assigned to bombing 5. They're named after whatever ship they are. Yorktown's CD5, Lexington was CD3, so that's the bombing group and fighter groups. The bombing group all landed appropriately as Yorktown was moving into the theater to defend essentially Pearl Harbor in Midway. And they, so bombing 5 landed, you guys, first time they've ever landed in combat on the Yorktown. But the fighter groups landed, one of them missed the hook and drove its plane directly into the back of the CG of the one of the carrier groups. So he was chopped out and both died, and they just essentially scuttled him overboard. So things are not always easy when you're going to battle, even before the battle begins. So the first strike, and then you have to read a little bit of this. The first strike, of course, in June 4th, is our guys take out pilots from all 3 carriers, take off and nail 3 Japanese carriers, and then later that day catch a 4th carrier. So they see the entire carrier group, carriers of the Japanese. So major turning point of the war at that point. Bob had been on one of the sector flights to scout that morning. Came back in, was on the next wave to launch off Yorktown, and they got hit. And they get a Japanese strike force following the first wave back. and 7 of them got through and nailed Yorktown in the first strike. Those, that's a big bomb hitting straight down into the flight deck. So everyone's scrambling on the Yorktown. This is Bob's story. I'd been in the ready room for the first attack. Upon cessation, I ran up one flight of stairs to the flight deck, the door of which came out of the island structure. There I faced a large pond of blood, 20 feet across, where a dozen men had been killed. The first thing I noticed was that the pool of blood was flowing away from the direction that the ship was violently turning. In right turns, the ship tables over away from the turn, and the blood was flowing. I quickly turned the corner behind the island, only to look down into the cargo, running 4 feet lower than the flight deck. There I saw and heard the cry of an old sailor lying on the catwalk. Please push me overboard. I was transfixed for a second time within seconds, as the man was lying there in a pool of his own blood and had both legs missing. I was experiencing stark terror and I stood immobile. I saw him grab the stanchion gable with one hand and with superhuman strength pull him overboard into the sea and death. This is one of the most heroic acts I've seen during the war. So the second strike comes right after that, and Bob's down with his Midwest vest underneath, and they've taken all the mattresses off so the Yorktown wouldn't burn. And they're hit again and shakes the whole thing. So he was hit by 2 major torpedoes at the time. The ship shook radically like a baby rattle. The lights went out, the room was filled with smoke. I got out toggle springs on my Midwest, entangled in the coil springs, and discharged his Midwest vest. He was kind of like Don Quixote fighting the windmill, fighting those springs and wanting to get out. His adrenaline kicked in, and when he got to the flight deck, the ship was listing, and Bob says, "I wanted my mother, I didn't like it." The ship was listing so much support when I got to the starboard, the high side, somehow I thought I was on the high side, I would balance the ship out. So the cook ran up behind him and looked up and said, "This deck is way too hot for my feet," and chopped overboard. Then abandoned ship came. But only America can do this. The sailors lined up from the Yorktown on the high side and literally took their shoes off in line, perfect line across the Yorktown, as if they were going to come back, and they wanted to be very organized with their footwear. But so as it was about to capsize with abandoned ship, destroyers on their escort came close to taking them and taking them out of the water. Floating blue jackets amused each other by calling taxi, taxi, and thumbing imaginary violence into drifting debris. Strains of beer barrel polka floated from one raft full of officers and men. So that's how the Yorktown happened to do it. This is how much list is on the Yorktown on June 4th in the afternoon. The fellow in the bottom right corner, the 2 kids in my. So they're picked up by the story of the Balch. And the Balch was just totally loaded with about 500 extra men when they hold 250 to start with. So they all slept the night in the mess where the surgeon went. And he said they'll never forget that. That's how crowded the Balch was at the time. So the bottom line, the miracle of Midway was quite an experience for a young 21-year-old Bob Gibson and all their other friends, even though a great success story for the rest of them. So they go back to Pearl. He's assigned to Enterprise, on these majestic carriers. So away they go to Guadalcanal. He's now on bombing 6. So Guadalcanal lasts about 9 months. This is a major battle for America. The Marines landed on August 7th. They're both at Guadalcanal and Tulagi across the way. So this is a picture of Private First Class Edward Aarons, and you can read the quote. The bastards tried to come over me last night. I guess they didn't know I was a Marine. So during that battle, the Marines landed on August 7th. The first Marine Raider Battalion landed on the island of Tulagi. 22-year-old, 140-pound PFC Edward Aarons among them. That night, the Japanese launched a vicious counterattack. Aarons stood his ground, securing the right flank of the line. In the morning, his company commander, Captain Lewis Wall, later 4-star General Lewis, found Aarons in his fighting hole. 11 enemy dead surrounded the hole. A dead Japanese officer and a dead Japanese sergeant were in the hole next to him. The blood-covered Marine reclined against the dirt wall, gunshot and stab wounds across his body, bearing witness to his savage fight. Aarons still clutched the dead officer's sword in his hand. Upon seeing his commander, Aarons uttered those words and then died, silently in the walt's arm. For his heroic one-man stand, like many one-man stands on Guadalcanal, Aarons was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. So that's the type of dedication that these vets have. So here is an SPD Dauntless Dive Bomber flying above the Enterprise. On it goes. It protected the Marine landings. Bob dropped the second bomb during the amphibious landing on Guadalcanal. He then got right into a giant dogfight, and with a bunch of Zeros, which are, of course, Japanese planes. And he's flying along, and all of a sudden, their seats are made of thick armor plate. And he is hit, all of a sudden, one of the shells from below, a Zero going in front of him, then a 20-millimeter cannon shell hit him in the seat and exploded. It had hit his bomb and glanced up and exploded against his seat, with shrapnel passing out through the radio equipment and 2 cockpits. Our seats were made of thick armor plate, bulletproof glass, protected the front of the pilot. The engine in front of us was also a shield. In order for the machine gun bullet to kill you, had to go right through the front side. So the cannon shell ricocheted from his bomb, exploded under his armored seat. The shrapnel took renewed energy and sprayed hot, jagged steel in all directions, except his body, saved by a seat, but no time to appreciate the miracle. So he moved on after that fight, splashed a couple Zeros, including what they thought was the greatest Japanese ace of all times of the war, Saburo Sakai, who had lost an eye and apparently did not hit the dirt, did not hit the water, and made it home on a 4-hour flight and dished it, but survived the war, which is amazing. And Bob and Sakai became really good friends later. But it's an interesting takeout. 5 days later, Bob was taking off off the Enterprise. This is his rear gunner. You can see the tail fin of his SPD coming off Enterprise, and his rear gunner taking it. Bob's the second from the left. And these are the 4 guys that took off and within 20 miles ran into the submarine and surprised everyone. And they dropped their 500-pound bombs and strafed the Japanese submarine, sinking it. And they got credit at least for sinking another submarine. So he has now at least 2 or 3 Zeros, a Japanese submarine. So he's starting to kind of get the gist of what's going on in the war. And this is an example of what happens. The Battle of Eastern Solomons happens, which is on August 24th. The Enterprise is crippled and has to limp back to Pearl to be repaired. He ditches again, and this time he ditches. He's running out of gas coming back from a mission set, and he ditches right beside in the wrong carrier group, beside the Saratoga, and he has 45 seconds to land on the water to get out of the water. And he had already gone to a couple boats in the morning and landed, making sure the rest of his crew made it. But he landed beside the Saratoga and the waves. He finally got out and they were fighting the plane. He went on board what he thought was a Farragut class destroyer. It was. He thought it was the same one that picked him up at Midway. Came on board and all he laconically said was back again. And the duty officer responded, "We're going to sell you a meal ticket next time around." So this is the second time the destroyer picks him out of the drink. Well, it's funny, he's in a different boat, but he ended up transferring to the Walsh, and they did sell him a meal ticket. So that was kind of a unique experience in the war. The Battle of Eastern Solomons was fascinating because at the end, the Enterprise took a major hit, and they lost 72 seamen, 2 officers, 6 officers, 89 wounded, and the lack of time and manpower at that time on the stricken ship ruled out committing each body individually to the deep. Under the supervision of the ship's captain, a single unidentified sailor was buried with traditional honors. Some 70 others collected in canvas sacks, weighted with spare metal, were dropped from the fantail without ceremony. That's how they buried people at sea at that point, their comrades. So Eastern Solomons. So they went back to Pearl and they started again. August 31st, the Saratoga was torpedoed in theater, lost that. September 15th, the Wasp was sunk. So we've now lost 3 major fleet carriers, and the Saratoga was drifting back, or they had been torpedoed, it's been sent back to Seattle to be repaired. So right now we're down carriers big time in a major battle off and on. Bombing 10 forms, and Bob has incredible stories about his buddies getting their heads chopped off in training accidents, landing and blowing up, and having to identify them and having to put those memories in as far back as you can in this time. So at age 22, they re-engaged as bombing 10 with Enterprise. That's bombing 10. Al Buell, I spoke to this earlier right here, and Bob's the fourth or fifth from the left on the second row. So they launch again. So he writes at age 22, they're out and on their way to back to Guadalcanal in the Solomons. At age 22, lost at sea on a stormy night, Fate had just appointed me the leader of 47 carrier aircraft and their crews. I must lead them in the black of the night back to the carrier and get them safely aboard. I remember my vow at Pearl Harbor and another power hid in the dark rain sky to hold. They had turned and got lost. They finally started, they only had 2 gallons of gas left. He got them back to the carriers, and as he landed, he had already been chopped up before in some training exercises. As he landed with like a gallon of gas left in his plane, caught the hook, started taxiing forward, and all of a sudden the klaxon alarm went off, and they braced because they didn't know what was going to happen. And pilot named Tiny Caron, pretty famous pilot, lands right behind him, misses the wire, and the propeller cuts all the way through Bob's plane up to the rear gunner, right there. So they hop out, and he's tired of being chopped up, and they push both aircraft aside, and they move on to another major carrier battle of the war. Bob was in all but one of the major carriers. He missed the first one until he crossed. So Battle of Santa Cruz is next. So at this time, the key Enterprise is down. There's Enterprise and Hornet. They're the only carriers in the entire U.S. fleet, and they're in trouble. The Japanese are resupporting Guadalcanal. They're moving their ships down. They start landing with the army there, so the carriers have to go into position to take out the reinforcement. And Bull Halsey, who had just taken over in the theater, Southwest Asia Theater, Southwest Asia Theater, said this was the most gripping moment of the war. Bull Halsey, and that's saying something. He issues 3-word order: strike would be strike to the carrier groups. And off they go. The Battle of Santa Cruz at the end of October occurs. Bob's out, comes back in, lands, he begins the scouting the night before, they drop bombs, they have some near misses and some hits. The Hornet was sunk. Big E was hit and hit bad, and that's of course the Enterprise. So we're down to one carrier and it's crippled. There's a friend of his, Dick Batten, one of the more fascinating stories of the war. Batten lands. It's Bob's good friends. Lands his torpedo plane, hadn't dropped his torpedo, hits the water. Right beside a destroyer, the USS Porter. The destroyer slows down, takes Big Batten out of there. But what they didn't realize, then that destroyer within 2 minutes, then is hit by a torpedo and sunk. Whoever picked up Batten, the destroyer then is sunk within 2. And what was really crazy about it, and used to kid Batten about this, was it was his torpedo that he had been able to drop when they hit the water released, and as torpedoes tend to do, they come out and around and they surge back and hit the boat that just saved him. So his torpedo sunk his own rescue crab, which is a little bit of a unique situation. So that's one thing, the Batten experience. So then there was one. So November 12th through 15th were kind of seminal days in Bob's career. The third naval battle of Guadalcanal. Now, Bob gets into real gear. This is what the Enterprise looks like after it's hit. Another giant list. And they come back out in a fight, ball crippled. 2 weeks later, after going to Nomea and New Caledonia to get as fixed up and patched up as they can. But this is the only one left in the entire Navy fighting against the entire Japanese fleet. So these guys, this is called the Cactus Air Force. They're on at Henderson Airfield in Guadalcanal. It's very famous Happy Voyage. It's the movies about a voyage and all the heroes kind of there. So that's kind of taking the place for carriers off Guadalcanal. They've got bombers everybody. That's their rescue. They can't get back to the carrier to go to Cactus. So that's what Bob does. Bob takes on and is the first to sight the Japanese fleet coming in again down the slot, which is in the Solomon Islands, supporting again Cactus Airfield. So this is a picture from Bob's plane. He has shaken out. This is on the cover of Black Magazine. It's one of the great shots of 1942. So November 14th, 1942, Bob gets his wish and drops 1,000-pound bomb right down the heavy cruiser Kumadasa and sinks it immediately with about 800 of its crew and captain. He then flies back to Cactus, is chased all the way there, and they're Japanese firing from the actual ground outside of Henderson's perimeter. He lands, they refuel, patch up things, and he flies back out with the Marines within an hour after debriefing Van Fleet and other and Geiger and some of the general systems. Follows the Marines out. Later that morning, drops a bomb straight into the hull of the Brisbane Maru, which was carrying 1,500 reinforcement troops to Guadalcanal. So you can start adding up the death toll. The bomb starts popping on everyone, sinks the Brisbane Maru right in half, and they all go. He then flies back to Henderson, loads again, and takes off again to go after more crabs. This is all the same day. The Cactus Air Force follows him, which are mainly Marines and a few of his Navy guys. They get caught in a giant dogfight at that point. Bob gets into a fight, takes it down to the surface. They're fighting. One aircraft chasing him all the way down the spot, and Bob's guns jammed, so he has nowhere to go. So he's jigging and jagging with zero coming behind him. The gunner's trying to do everything he can to unclog his machine guns. Can't do it. He's riddled with everything. He loses control, gets down to about 100 feet from the deck, pulls out, and somehow the Japanese guy finally gives up. He's out of bullets, and all he does is a wave and a salute to Bob as he pulls away to go back to his door. So Bob lands on Cactus, the Cactus at Henderson Field. They get out. There's like 300 bullet holes in his plane, and they just shove it into the ditch. There's nothing else to do. To me, he got in there with like no gas left. So Bob's had a hell of a day. He goes up the next day and sinks the Kunagawa Maru and another 1,000 or so Japanese troops that are reinforcing Guadalcanal. So single-handedly, he's accounted for thousands and thousands of Japanese deaths and 3 major ships, the submarine and a couple of Zeros. He's given the Navy Cross. He reports them to Halsey, and Halsey says, whatever word you want. And he says, and said the Medal of Honor, he said, no, that's for the guys on the ground. So he took the Navy Cross. He didn't say I didn't want it. I says, that's my job. I'm a highly paid tactician, and that's what he does. So that's Bob's story. He then comes back, does the tour, war bond tours with Jack Dempsey and William Holden, and he's one of America's great heroes, Sergeant York, Navy Sergeant York. Then comes back to second tour and the air officer for the Philippine invasions in his Group 8, and then Borneo, his 13th major battle, the first and last amphibious landings Bob was in. When the surrender of Japan occurred, that day, he says, I'm going, here's my papers, I've done enough. The admiral signs off on me, hitchhikes back, United States never flies a plane again. That's Bob. So let me just end with this. Remember I told you August 25th, 1942, 77 buried at sea from the Enterprise. I want to end with what I think is a very important. That's Kunagawa, stateside, Bob's in the middle, war bonds, Bill stadiums, Texas Stadium with Lyndon Johnson and everybody, Borneo, Bob, of course, with the beer in his hand. That's how he lives. And there's Bob. So that's his story. This is a variation on In Flanders Field called In Waters Deep. It's attributed to a 90-year-old lady named Eileen Mahoney in remembrance of sailors lost during World War II, now serving their eternal patrol beneath the waves. In ocean wastes no poppies blow, no crosses stand in ordered row. There young hearts sleep beneath the waves, the spirit of the good, the brave. But stars a constant vigil keep for them who lie beneath the deep. 'Tis true, you cannot kneel in prayer on certain spot and think he's there. But you can to the ocean go, see whitecaps marching row on row. No one for him will always ride in and out with every tide. And when your span of life has passed, he'll meet you at the captain's mast. And they who mourn on distant shore, for sailors who'll come home no more, can dry their tears and pray for these who rest beneath the heaving seas. For stars that shine and winds that blow, and whitecaps marching row on row, they can never lonely be, for when they lived, they chose the sea. So today and every day, please honor our veterans and those who serve our nation.
wonderful. And a reminder, we do have this recorded in case anybody who's not here ever wants to. Listen to it. We've been talking. Thank you. Thank you once again. So with that, it's a meeting. Before we test, you stand please. Of the things we think. Say do. Is concerned. Little bit of better relationships. Will be beneficial to all. Sure, thank you.